I'm legislator Catherine Parker, representing the Sound Shore of Westchester. Welcome to Meet the Candidates. There is an important election coming up Tuesday, November 6th. Besides the races for governor, attorney general, and congressperson, we will be electing 3 candidates to serve on the Board of Trustees for the Village of Mamaroneck. We are very lucky. All bring experience. We have current trustee Victor Tafur, current trustee Keith Waite, and former trustee Dan Natchez. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why don't we start with each of you telling a little bit about yourselves. Let's start with trustee Tafur.
Thank you very much. I came here about 14 years ago, looking for a diverse place, and I've always felt great here. People are welcoming. My family's been happy, and I've started growing my roots here and never realized I would become a trustee, but it actually talks how this community is welcoming, and we'll try to keep it that way, and that's very important for me.
Absolutely. How about you, trustee Waite?
Catherine, I came here with my family from England about 21 years ago. I was a banker by profession until about 12 years ago, then set up my own business training bankers to behave. I also felt I needed to give back to the community, so as a public servant, that's what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. I'm married with 2 kids who went through the Mamaroneck school system and are now working and off my payroll in the city, so that's me.
Excellent. And Dan, you're a familiar face to many people in Mamaroneck. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself?
I've been here all my life. Mamaroneck is a very special place for me. I run a international environmental waterfront design consulting company, so I travel all over the world, and Mamaroneck is very unique, and that's why I choose to live here. I was the youngest person ever elected to the Board of Trustees and had the dubious honor of serving for 6 years. It actually was quite an experience. I learned a great deal about it. We were able to move the village forward back then, and I'm looking forward to helping do it more today.
Excellent. So let's talk about your top issues. Why don't we start with you, Keith?
Great.
What would you like, looking on how you've been serving and want to continue moving forward?
Right. Yes, thank you. I think my top 2 issues, if I can select 2, there's so many, are the revitalization of the industrial area and transportation and mobility, or traffic and parking, maybe is better, it's known as. So those are the 2 that I want to talk about today. The industrial area, for those people that may not know, is the area between the I-95 and the train tracks, and then Fenimore Road and Rockland Avenue. The 3 streets, Waverley Avenue, Centre Avenue, and Fayette Avenue. So that's the area that is the district is zoned as M1, Manufacturing 1, that's the area. And I started getting involved in this before I became trustee. I was on the Industrial Area Committee and Advisory Committee looking at how we can make this area more vibrant than it is now. So we've been working with the community, with residents, with business owners, outside agencies and consultants to try and come up with a concept that we think will actually make this attractive for people as a go-to destination, really. So we want to make it complementary to the folks that do business on Mamaroneck Avenue. We want it to be attractive to residents and attractive to people that work in Mamaroneck. So what we've done is we've actually now just introduced a proposal, which is a rezoning proposal. And what it actually is an overlay over the existing M1 zone that will allow existing people that work there and uses to continue, but also allow us to introduce new uses into that area. We've renamed that area the Maker Zone to reflect the type of culture and the type of character that we're wanting down there.
So can you describe what a Maker Zone is for people watching at home?
It actually has, it actually is a M for manufacturing, light manufacturing, A for arts, K for crafts, I could never spell, K for crafts.
Craft beer.
Craft beer, there you go. E for environmental and educational, and R for residential and recreational. So we've got that, but the idea is a sort of vibe of a craft-based community. So we've got this overlay zone that allows existing uses to continue and new uses to come in, and we are allowing things such as microbreweries and microdistilleries, pubs and small restaurants, street cafes, but also things like artist lofts, educational centres, satellites for other educational centres. We're looking at maybe a boutique hotel. We're looking for the type of work-live scenarios, working, in incubators and things like that. The idea is to keep people in Mamaroneck and not have them go somewhere else. We're close enough to New York to be a good venue for a lot of these type of businesses now.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're thinking ahead to millennials too, and attracting new people in.
That's right. And I think, people no longer need to work in an office with everyone else. They can work remotely. This is a great place for people to come and do that. Start up businesses, maybe leave high school and say, well, I can do this here. I can stay here. So we also want to sort of streetscape it and make it look a little bit more the character, like a bit more gritty, some, sort of murals.
Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and a lot cheaper than Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is what we're hoping. So that's the idea of that. So currently, we have this now proposal for the rezoning in front of the Board of Trustees and the various land use boards. They're all looking at it this month, and then probably around the middle of October, we'll all get together in a room and thrash out what we want and move that forward. So that's I think very exciting, and it's something I'm passionate about, and that's my number one issue.
I hear it. I hear the passion. It sounds really terrific. Victor, let's hear what are your two issues.
Okay, the comprehensive plan, and I'll try to dissect that and try to relate to our viewers. And the other is the moratorium, another heavy topic. Both of those relate to my background. I'm an environmental lawyer, and also an educator. I teach part-time in a university and a college. So those are two topics that are very dear to me. And actually, how I got involved with the community. I participated in one of those, and I got sucked into it. But let me explain. Let me talk first about the comprehensive plan and why does it matter. I think the main thing is that New York villages have retained control of kind of their local development and their local laws. That's vital. So we, of course, have some local laws. We have a budget. That's probably about a third of what local residents pay. The other goes to the school district and a little bit to the county. So that's important for you, right? But not everything. But we need to. So we need to focus that money where it should go. So it's those services for the community. And on the other hand, we also have to direct the planning and where the village is going. So that's why it's so important. Then, what really is a comprehensive plan? It's the vision for what we want in the village and how to do it.
So how far out does this comprehensive plan generally look?
That's a good question, and then I'll go backwards when it was done. But it should be around 10, 15 years. Actually, there's debate about that, how long you want to do it, but I think nowadays looking at least 10, 15 years. And you can also do long-term, mid-term, and long-term. Actually, that's something that we're striving to do in a more targeted way, so that it's not just too broad, too pie in the sky, but be more focused and specific. So that's one of the things we're trying to align. But the main topic is zoning has to be aligned with the comp plan, and eventually all the other policies of the board. So that's why it's so important. And why are we doing it now? Actually, we're not doing a comprehensive plan, but we're doing a comprehensive plan update. The previous one was 2012. Everything started 2008, so about 10 years ago. And actually, probably some of the viewers were involved in that. So we're not starting from scratch. We're just building, piggybacking on the tremendous effort that was put in there, and thanks to everybody that has taken us here. But the plan called for a 5-year review. So actually, the first day I was sworn in, I moved and looked at my colleagues and I said, it's about time, it's 5 years, it's next month. Do you all support this? And they said yes, and actually it was a diverse board, it was the previous mayor, but everybody told us we're on board, so let's move forward. So what are we doing? Essentially we're doing 2 tracks. One is to focus more the plan on resiliency and sustainability, 2 big terms, but I'll just break them simply in we want to address flooding and more long-term view of our village, environmentally, and how to align ourselves with state programs. So how to focus the discussion better. And the other thing is about keeping our community character. Right.
Very important.
All right. So that kind of moves into the moratorium, because actually we're in the middle of this, the moratorium came about. Now the moratorium started this year in October, and it's a 6-month moratorium only on 2 things, on multifamily housing and on subdivisions that would end up being 3 or more residences. So that's the scope. And how it would affect the Mamaroneck Avenue, the Post Road, Halstead. So those are the areas. What are we doing? We're studying the impact on the schools. We're studying the impact on the roads. And we're taking a prototype, well, not we, but our consultants, we're of course very close to the process. We're developing how much does it cost the village, how much it costs this school district to do all this. Then we do the plan and we come up with the numbers. We run the numbers, and that would inform what we need to do. So it's a more sophisticated way of doing it piecemeal, and it's a good investment for our school district and the village as a whole. So it's a long story, but
It sounds good, and I think we're going to be coming back to that, because what you laid out on the table, there's a lot of meat there. So we're going to come back. But let's turn to you, Dan. What are your 2 issues?
Well, it's not with issues, but I'm going to follow up with what Victor is doing with the comprehensive plan, because it's very important. And I thank Victor for all his energy and efforts to try and move this forward. Mamaroneck's at a crossroad. When I was a younger kid here, there was a lot of vacant land. We don't have any more vacant land. So what are developers doing? They're building high-rise, high-density units. It's changing the character of the village. I've been out walking this village since the start of the campaign, talking to people. This is on a lot of people's minds, and I'm not talking about just people who come to meetings. I'm talking about people who stay home or not as actively involved in things. Are very concerned. They're concerned about the traffic. They're concerned about the fact that the schools are overcrowded and they can't put more people in. And we've actually failed our neighborhoods in trying to plan for the sustainability of the village field. And just so people understand, I am pro-development. I represent developers across the world. But our business plan and models are much different than what's happening in this village.
So smart development?
Smart development, lower development, more user-friendly development, more open space, more architectural features of tiered buildings rather than boxes. If you want a box, you want a square, go to the city, go to the cities, go to the Bronx, go to White Plains. One of the big things that we have done is we have failed neighborhoods like Washingtonville. We have over 100 units that have been approved that are going up. That's over 200 cars, just assuming people stick to 2 cars. Washingtonville is overcrowded with no parking or not enough parking for what's presently there. Tremendous traffic. We failed them. We failed to listen to them. And more importantly, we failed to plan to guide for that.
Not to interrupt, but is transparency then an issue, like how that happened? And
it happens because many times people come to meetings. For good examples of 2 other neighborhoods that have been failed are sort of like Grove Street and Henry Street and Heathcote Hill, where developments were proposed and the public came out strongly concerned about the long-term effect. Not the NIMBY approach, but the long-term effect, not only to the visual effect, but the quality of life. And we just have not tuned our laws to be responsive to that. It takes a lot for somebody to get up at a meeting to say something. And many times we don't give answers to them. And everybody on every board has a responsibility to answer questions that are raised. And I think that's more important to, if we don't know the answers, simply say, okay, we'll get back to you with that, as opposed to dismissing it or letting it just slide by the board. We need to take a much more proactive stance in transparency and involvement. Our Our volunteers are the backbone of this community, but there are a lot more people that are just not pulled into the volunteer effort, and we need to do more to get them to establish their voice. So from my view, this election is not about the three of us. It's not about the top issues that we are concerned about. It should be the top issues of what's in the public. And I'm hoping that people who read, see this will give us a call, tell us what's on their mind. We have the great, the not so good, and some ugly. We can't improve those things without knowing everybody's feelings. And we're not going to be able to accomplish everything quickly, but we can make major inroads. And this is the type of thing that I think we need to do. We need to think not in the 10 to 12 year or 15 year, but the decisions we make today will make the difference, 30 to 50 years from today. When Lindsay was mayor, he downzoned Manhattan and all the other boroughs, and he gave incentives to get the zoning back. What used to happen is you had buildings wall to wall. Now you have many parks, you have buildings set back from the street. We need to do more of that as opposed to just an FAR. We need to look at density, we need to look at how it affects it and how it fits in with neighborhoods, and we need to not change the character of neighborhoods if that's not what the neighborhoods want.
Right. Trustee Waite, it's interesting listening to you all. I feel like a lot dovetails, but there's some interesting variations. Would you like to make a comment on what Dan was saying and how that fits in?
Yeah, sure. I was going to just talk a little bit about the traffic and parking because that was my second issue that you overlooked. Oh. No, I was going to talk quickly on that, which actually does dovetail quite nicely to all that we were doing. Traffic, I think we need to look at traffic in terms of what it's going to be like in 5 to 10 years' time and address it now and get ahead of the problem. There's no point in talking about how awful it is and then just sitting there and doing nothing about it. So I think there's a number of things we can do and do pretty quickly on that one. The first thing is we need to look at trying to get people not to use their cars more. I know that sounds silly, but we have to give them incentives to use other things. So let's look at bike lanes. Let's look at bike sharing schemes like Jump and things like that we can actually get people out on their bikes. We need to make sure our sidewalks are safe to walk on, that they are suitable for disabled people, and that they are safe for kids going to school, so the crosswalks. We have a smart safety initiative working now with one of our consultants to look at around the school areas and see how we can make it more safe for our kids to go to school. So that will encourage people to walk a little bit more. Again, when it comes to traffic, getting people to leave their cars behind, we have to look at maybe higher parking fees. I know that's maybe not something people like, but that's a discouragement. We also need to look at parking in terms of tiered parking lots. We are going to get to a point where just road level parking is not going to be enough in this village. So we need to look at tiered parking lots. Certainly for the industrial area, the maker zone, that's the only way I think we can actually encourage people there. Maybe even behind Mamaroneck Avenue down by the station. Now, it's expensive tiered parking lots, that's why we don't do them. But public-private initiatives together, we can do something about that. So we need to look at that as well. So really when it comes to traffic, it's the parking, the on-street parking, which drives me crazy. There are 38 different on-street parking meter zones in the village of Mamaroneck. And we've just started an app today for people to actually pay by app, but I can't believe they'll understand 38 different parking zones. I hope they will, but we need to simplify it. We need to make people understand why the rates are the way they are, and we need to really discourage people from using their car when we can offer another alternative to that. So that's my traffic and parking.
No, I'm glad you went back to the traffic report.
Yeah.
I think that's an area that people, everybody
so.
Cares about, ease and convenience. Let's go to you, Victor.
On a couple topics raised by Dan. Yeah. Public participation, I think that's what it comes to.
Yeah.
Now our work sessions are televised by LMC-TV. We thank LMC-TV. We know we burden you a lot, but it's key now in these days with media issues, and I won't get into that topic, but if people want to be informed in this community, they turn the local live, they can watch this meeting, they can watch programs on demand, so that's vital. It also, there's a little bit of pressure Yeah, I'll be honest, and some people have asked me, is that a good thing, a bad thing? I said, overall, we're learning, but everything is transparent, everything is open.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, an improvement.
Can I also say the land use boards, the key land use boards are also televised. So the key decision making that we make in the village is now televised. And I think from a transparency point of view and making people aware of what's going on, again, they can come to any of these meetings, they can stand up and they can talk about what they're wanting. But in terms of transparency, we're ahead of the regulations and the requirements that we have to be transparent. And we're very, very conscious of that fact, that we're wanting to make sure people do have the chance to hear what's going on. People are never going to be satisfied that that's enough, but from a governmental point of view, we are very much ahead of the game in making sure that people understand that. And you can never over-communicate, but at the end of the day...
Can I give you guys some credit, too? A lot of communities right here in the county do not have their land use board meetings televised. So I really compliment you for taking that step.
It's a major step in the right direction, and we can do a lot more about it. And I think that these are very important things in trying to involve more people. And there are very proactive steps that have been taken, and there are a lot more that we can do in relation to that, and in times of bringing the public in and answering their questions and seeking their advice.
I agree. I think the volunteer committees we have, which is quite unique, we have volunteer committees from the budget committee, down to water quality and so on and so forth, represent the true sort of volunteerism that we have in this community, that people want to do that. I think most of us are here now because we were volunteers in one of those committees. But I think the wealth of experience and knowledge in those committees, we can harness much better. I think we can use them much more and rely on them a little bit more than we do now. So I think it's time after a few years of having those that we take stock and say, are we maximizing that huge benefit that we have there? And that's maybe something we should look at once we're
I think that's true. I think I'd like to also introduce, we also need to be more cost effective in our planning and our long-term thinking, because the board goes through a very lengthy budget process. You do it at the county. Victor and Keith had the dubious honor of doing it, for a couple of years in a row. But each year you come up with a budget, and then within 4 months you're adding substantial amounts of things that are coming up that have never been discussed or never part of the budget period or discussion. And so the question is, we need to really think...
For like an emergency, something that's come up
I'm not talking about emergencies, I understand, but I'm talking about somebody has a different project, or they want a different piece of equipment, or they want to change something. These are types of things that in industry, you're required to do a full review of your department and come up with a long-range plan. Not the budget for the next year, but most industries require you to budget next 5 years, 10 years. So you have an idea of where you're going, and so that when budget proposals come in, they can be looked at in cost-effectiveness approaches to life. In my business, one of the things that we concentrate in is trying to combine not only the maintenance items, but with the capital projects, so that we don't pave a street and then have it dug up, 6 months later because Con Ed decided it didn't want to, cooperate and talk about what they're doing with you. These are the types of things that we really need to do, because it makes a major effect. The taxes are up. We're not going to lower them, but what we can do is be more frugal in how we spend the money and try and decrease the rate of increase.
I know, Victor, you have
I just want to jump in, because that's a good mix. You come in, you've been at the board in the past, and I'm sort of laughing, not in a bad way, but in a good way, because being a trustee is harder than you ever imagined. One of the hardest things are the financials on the budget. For example, I recently went to a training, Controller General on long-term planning, but that's very difficult. So we do need to move and be on top of it. It's a learning process, and you have to strive to get it better and better every year. And I think we're getting closer and closer, but certainly we need to shake it and get better. But on public participation, I have one thing I can't miss, is that this moratorium and this comprehensive plan is going to be presented to the public. And in some of these meetings, on the moratorium, for example, on October 9th, residents will be able to see a 3D model taking a block of Mamaroneck. And how would it look if you would have the full multifamily developments in the max possible? And how much would it cost? And what would be a reasonable possibility of having? So these are things that will be tangible to our residents, and then will inform the discussion of where we are going to go in the long term. Because it's not are you for or are you against? How many more kids? Is getting the information, real output.
Data-driven.
So
yeah.
Data-driven, and
Yeah.
it's going to cost us, and that's why it's important. The moratorium study is going to cost us $100,000. A lot of money, but it's a good investment. The comp plan is 70, but we're getting half of them in grants. There are grants for all this, so we're trying to, it's not just consultants or getting things, but we're also thinking about how much is this going to cost? Is it worth the investment?
I think that's a great point that you bring up. You know, the outlay of money but the investment, knowing that this can really come back to save. And your neighbors along the Sound Shore have been doing a similar let's do the moratorium, let's evaluate, get some real analysis and see some numbers that really show where this community is headed. So I think it's, again, to what you were saying earlier, Dan, you know, that smart development and planning and the importance of that. And Keith, you, I know, have that financial sensitivity too. So
I think it's also, and we've all said this in our own way, is let's not just be tactical about how we run this village, but let's be strategic. Let's look out 5 years, 10 years, 50, and make a decision, or whether it's the right one or not, on how we want this village to look, and then work towards that. Because if you have a strategy and you agree on that, then the tactical stuff in between becomes a lot easier to decide upon, because you basically say, is this in line with what we've got planned? And if it's not, then that's an easy decision. So, and I think we are being, with my business finance hat on, we are being fiscally responsible. Over the last 2 years, certainly while I've been involved directly in the budget, we have kept it under the cap. Unlike a lot of municipalities around have gone up to 8, 9, 10%, we've kept it at the sort of 2% that we wanted. Now, that's the operating budget. What Dan was also talking about is that we have a capital budget as well with big ticket items that we are going to decide when we're going to actually spend that money, depending on how it goes. So,
I think all of this ties into the one question we have to ask on everything, whether it's a proposal for development or budgets or planning, is what's in it for the village? What do we really want? And are we really attaining that? And I think that's the real message.
I think that's a great way to sort of end that part of the conversation. I'm going to ask one quick question. We'll consider this the lightning round. What's your favorite thing about the village of Mamaroneck? I mean, what's the one thing that you really think, this is why I'm happy to serve, happy to live here?
I think it's the people that live here. I think it's the people that you meet. It is a diverse community. Whether you live in Orient or Washingtonville or wherever, it's a diverse community. We embrace diversity. We welcome the different inputs that we have to the community from the residents.
Victor?
He took it away from me, but so I have to say the water, being close to the water, and it's this number one issue that people are concerned.
Excellent. Dan?
Both of those were my first and second. So it's really the encompassing of everybody to enjoy it in the quality of life that this village has as a village, not as a city.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you. This was really a wonderful discussion. To the viewers watching, thank you so much for tuning in to Meet the Candidates. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Come on out, be a good American, and vote. Very, very important. Lots of races on the ballot. So come on out, vote. And thank you again for watching. I'm Catherine Parker.